Good evening and welcome to the live analysis of EOM 15 as per the new pattern. Let us first start with the analysis of quant section. This is what we follow: topic distribution, question mapping, expected attempts, and expected scores and percentile equivalence. So let's begin. This is how QA section of EOM 15 looked like. There were 3 questions on time, speed, and distance. One set based on probability, where 3 questions were involved. 2 questions on numbers and percentage each, including quadratic equation and surge in indices. And 1 question on rest of the chapters, that is basic algebra, linear equation, profit and loss, ratio proportion, SICI, averages, allocation and mixture, time and work, permutation, combination, logarithm, and set theory. Surprisingly, geometry was absent from this paper. Let's look at the question mapping. So this was the first question, which we can classify as easy question because this was based on profit and loss, where a fixed profit was required. Remember, fixed profit and not fixed profit percentage. Okay, so initial conditions where there was 20% profit and 20% discounts that were to be allowed, but keeping the profit fixed, if we change the cost price by 10%, what should be the change in the discount that was required? So we can simply work with the values here and find out the required answer. Next question was based on surge in indices, where comparison of x square, 2x, x raised to minus 2, and 2 raised to x was given, and we have to find out the least of these numbers. Now, this question was an absolutely easy question because x was given as minus 0.5. And if you simply glance through all the values, you'll come to know that only one value can be negative out of these 4, and that is 2x. Rest all are positive, and therefore, this question was a very easy question. A question from ratio proportion was given, where 2a plus 3b upon 2a minus 3b was equal to 8 upon 5, and 3a plus 4c upon 3a minus 4c was equal to 13 upon 9. So what you had to do is you can take componendo and dividendo and get the ratio of a and b from the first expression, get the ratio of a and c from the second expression, and then finally we can work with these 2 ratios and get the value of b by c. Next question was based on SICI. This was again an absolute sitter, where it was given that at simple interest, a certain investment becomes 6 times in 15 years. So we have to understand that 6 times means 500% increase. So this 500% increase happens in 15 years. We have to find out in what time duration 1100% increase will happen. A question on allocation and mixture was also given, where amount of water that was to be added to the mixture in order to reverse the milk water ratio was to be found out. So initially, milk and water were in the ratio of A is to B. You are adding certain quantity, which is C quantity of milk, and the ratio reverses to B is to A. And then again, in order to reverse the ratio for the second time, how much water was to be added, that was required. So at first glance, the question might look slightly tricky here, but once you start taking the values, like you can take the quantity of milk as A and water as B, and you can start adding the next quantity, which is C. So the question becomes a doable one. A question based on probability. In fact, a set of questions based on probability was given. There were 3 questions where certain conditions were given. There were 5 boys and 5 girls from Mumbai, 3 boys and 3 girls from Delhi, and 1 boy and 1 girl were from Bangalore. Now, 3 girls from Mumbai were married to 3 boys from Mumbai, and remaining 2 girls from Mumbai were married outside Mumbai. So these were the conditions given, and there were 3 questions of probability based on that. So my suggestion is, if you can solve 3 questions, then making a few cases is totally worth it. You should go for such sets because by making a few cases, you get to solve 3 questions here. Another question based on the same set, where we had to find out the probability of a Bangalore girl married to a Mumbai boy. So both of these were doable questions, provided if you can make the cases dependent on the initial conditions. A question based on logarithm was given, where looking at the question only, we come to know that yes, this is a question which is based on change of base. So we simply apply the change of base rule to all the expression, all the terms that are given. And finally, we can cancel out the terms from the expression. Only the last term, which is log of 125, and the first term, which is 1 upon log 5 remains, and that is giving you an answer of 3. Let's look at question mapping of moderate questions. So a question on percentage was given where A and B were exchanging their marbles. So initially A is giving 40% of his marbles to B, and then B is giving 20% of his new quantity to A. And now A is having 90% of the marbles that A initially had. So if you can follow the word problem properly, this question was a doable one. A question on numbers was given where a number was expressed as A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C. And it was also given that D, E, F is twice of A, B, C. So if you break it down, you'll come to know that the number is nothing but A, B, C multiplied by 1001 the whole square. And once you get 1001 in the picture, you come to know, you already know that this number is divisible by 7, 11, 13, 91, etc. So that was the concept involved here. A question based on quadratic equation was given where again there was a word problem, and it was given that sum of squares of the roots was equal to square of sum of the roots. To some students, to a lot of students, this might look slightly tricky language, but again you have to learn to start using you have to learn to deal with the word problem. So if you just go step by step here, it was sum of squares of root, which is alpha square plus beta square, and that is equal to square of sum of the roots, which is alpha plus beta the whole square. So once you equate this, you will immediately come to know that alpha beta becomes 0, and therefore C is equal to 0. A question on surds and indices was given where these two expressions were involved in the question. It was x cube equal to y raised to 4, and then x raised to y is equal to y raised to x. So what we can do is we can simply get x is equal to y raised to 4 upon 3. And that value of x we can substitute in the second expression. Keep solving, you get the value of x and y both. A question based on averages was given where average of the top 4 students was 28 more than the overall average. We have to find out the average of the remaining 56 is how much less than the overall average. So simply making an equation here will work. A question based on time and distance was given where it was given that A beats B by a certain distance, B beats C by a certain distance, C beats D by a certain distance. We have to find out by what distance A can beat D. So this was a very regular type of question based on the common ratio. We have to find out the common ratio of A is to B is to C is to D. And then we can relate A with D. And then we have to scale up or scale down depending upon the length of the race. A question based on, once again, this is the question from the same set, slightly different one. So I'm putting it in the moderate category here. Bangalore based boy and girl married to each other. That was the required probability here. Let's look at the question mapping of moderate and time consuming questions. So a percentage based question where a ratio of weight of square and circle was to be found out. So there were 3 shapes given initially: a square, a triangle, and a circle. All of them were having the same thickness. So that is their way of showing that the weight is directly proportional to the area. So basically we had to work with the area here. And then it was given that if 50% of the square is taken out and added to the circle, and then some percentage of circle is added to the triangle, then the side of the triangle increases by 20%. So what we have to understand is the area increases by 44%, right? So we have to make 2 equations here, and then we can relate both of them and get the ratio of weight for square and circle. So this was a time consuming question because it required making 2 equations here, and the equations were also not that straightforward. A question based on numbers was given. Successive division. Yes, successive division is a very simple concept, and most of you know how to apply this. But this question goes a little further than that. This also required us to find out the number of values that n can have, provided if n is less than 1,000. So there was an extra catch over here in this question. A question on basic algebra. To a lot of students, this might look like a surds and indices, but this is not actually surds and indices. This is simply a binomial expansion of the given expression, which is a plus b whole raised to 5. So we have to carry out 2 expansion over here, and a few of the terms will get cancelled out. We have to simplify the remaining terms and get the answer. A question on time and work was given where 18 men were to be used instead of 17 men. But the question was not that simple, that if you use 18 men, the work gets 17 by 18 times faster. Okay, that's not the question here. The question was 17 men starting the work. Every day, one man is leaving the work. So we have to find out the total amount of work that was done by 17 men. And then if you start the same work with 18 men in the same pattern, in how many days the work was finished? That was the actual question. So this might require some time for students to calculate. A question based on time and distance was given. It was actually a question from a set of two questions where Baba Atomic Research is developing a particle which, they are developing speed enhancers of the particle. And there was a bit of story built around the question. The question was basically the time required to find out the time required to complete one revolution for the electron. But whenever the electron passes through the speed enhancer, the speed of the electron increase by 2 meter per second if it is moving in the anti-clockwise direction, and if it is moving the clockwise direction, the speed gets reduced by 2 meter per second. So this was a time consuming question in my view. A question on permutation and combination where sum of 6-digit numbers was supposed to be found out. The numbers were formed using 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this was a direct formula driven question where the formula that is applicable here is n minus 1 factorial multiplied by 111 repeated 6 times multiplied by the sum of digits. To those who have attended the PPF reinforcement recently, who they will have worked on the same questions recently. Okay, so it was a 6-digit number here, and therefore the initial value was 5 factorial multiplied by 111 written 6 times plus the sum of digits. But remember, we have to find out only 6-digit numbers, and therefore we have to subtract the summation of those numbers which start with 0. So once again, it is 4 factorial 111 written 5 times multiplied by the sum of digit, and we have to carry out the subtraction of both of the cases. A question based on set theory was given where number of old males with or without diseases, without other diseases were to be found out. So there were 3 sets. One is male versus female, the other one is old versus young, and the third one is with and without other diseases. So it was a Venn diagram based questions where 3 sets were involved. Question mapping on difficult questions. A linear equation based question was given where we had to find out the value of 2a plus 2b minus 4m. So again, this was a word problem where a person called Rajnikant was buying 2 apple, 2 banana and returning 4 mangoes to a shopkeeper. And we had to find out how much money does he need to pay to the shopkeeper or how much the shopkeeper pays to him because he's also returning 4 mangoes. So there were 2 equations already given and we had to find out the third dependent equation, which was based on 2 equations. A question on quadratic equation was given where sum of roots of 4 equations was to be found out. So 2 of them were a quadratic one, 2 of them were a cubic one. We only need to know here that sum of the roots for any kind of question, be it quadratic, be it cubic, be it a biquadratic equation, the sum of the roots is always minus b upon a. So we had to take it for all the 4 equations and finally we have to add them. A question on time and distance, again, the one which is based on the Baba Atomic Research Center. So this was a question where 2 electrons were moving in the opposite direction and we had to find out the time required for both of the electrons to meet each other. So what is the catch here? There were 2 speed enhancers. So one of the electron will increase its speed and the other one will decrease its speed because the other one is moving in the opposite direction. So the one which is moving in the clockwise direction will lose its speed. So this is the summary of what we have discussed. There were 8 easy questions. This is something that we saw in the first slide of question mapping. So out of these 8 questions, most of them we expected to solve around 7 questions out of these 8. There were moderate questions to an extent of 7 questions. Again, we expect a high number of attempts from here. You can solve around 6 questions. Moderate but time consuming. Yes, they were also doable. So 4 out of 7 questions will be a reasonable expectation here as well. And difficult questions, it's okay if you can leave those questions and focus on the easier ones and the moderate ones. You can still make 17 attempts out of 25. That is our expected attempts. And if you attach 80 to 85% of accuracy to this, we reach around 14 questions as correct ones. Remaining 3 can be incorrect, and therefore the net score should be somewhere around 40 marks. So this is how the percentile mapping looks like. This 40 marks becomes our 98 percentile. And again, this paper was a scoring paper. After EOM 13, we again found a paper where marks can be scored because a lot of questions were easy and moderate and less time consuming questions. So people can easily go higher in such kind of papers. They can easily reach 45, 50 if they are well prepared, and that gets you 99 percentile at 44 marks. 100 percentile will be available at 57. Even if you are getting a score of 20 marks, that still fetches you 80 percentile. Now 20 marks is nothing but 7 net correct, and getting 7 net correct in such paper is not at all a difficult job. So this is it from my side. I'll request Ajit sir to carry on with verbal analysis. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shivam sir. I am going to take it over from here. Right. So EOM 15, the first test after Diwali. How are people feeling? I don't know. My first expectation is that people are feeling very, very surprised with what just happened with this test. I will not be.
Thank you, Shivam sir. I am going to take it over from here.
I will not be surprised with if people feel weird about this paper because they've seen a couple of questions which I don't think they expected. And it is okay. We are in the last 10-day stretch of verbal ability, so we should be prepared for these kind of shocks. Intentionally, we will continue to add some or the other of these kind of questions so that we remind you with every mock that stick to your strengths, stick to your strengths, stick to your strengths. No matter what happens, if your strengths are whatever you have been doing with your mock cats in the last few days, please stick to your strengths. In fact, like previous time, when I show you how you should have approached this test, you will again see the same thing. My approach to getting a 98 percentile on this test is again going to be the same. Stick to your strengths and stick to the conventional pattern. Anyways, what did we have this time? So you had reading comprehension, 16 questions, 2 questions in summary, 2 in out of context. People had an absolute bouncer in logical continuation and grammar and usage. That is why I have labeled this test an overall moderate level difficulty. On actual cat, yes, this should be labeled a moderate level difficulty only. What should you have done? I have always said in some cases, in all cases, always use a strategy to select questions. There were a lot of questions on this test which you should have avoided. That's why I said stayed away from surprise questions. Questions that you might not have done in the last few days for whatever reasons you should have avoided in this mock, no matter how much they are your strength. 25 minutes to passages, 15 minutes to other questions. Why? Because passages, you had only 16 questions out of 25, and the other questions deserved a decent 15 minutes. Specifically also because the other questions, not all of them were questions without a negative marking. Out of context, yes, no negative marking, but the other questions did have a negative marking. You could not take the same old breezy approach of randomly marking these questions. And back to what I always say, you should have remembered the golden rule: 80% attempts, 80% accuracy. Ambedkar versus Gandhi. Everybody who has been reading newspapers regularly, either in hard copy or online, some of you might have seen this because it's a very, very contemporary passage. Yes, The passage was very, I would say, moderate to read, only because, see, when cat reduces duration, I understand there is going to be a sort of a pressure on all of you to read a lot of content. So even if this passage is fairly easy to read, I'll call it moderate, not easy, because there is a time pressure on you. This is your first passage. You are reading it with an additional amount of concentration or focus, which definitely increases the challenge in reading this passage. You can't breeze through it. So 4 questions. Reading the entire passage was very important, because you had a main idea question, which again, straight away from the main idea, you had 2 close choices. Then we had an inference. Then we had one question on mentioned in the passage. Then we had another on meaning of the phrase. From Ambedkar versus Gandhi, you went to the second passage on black holes. Again, not very challenging to read, but because of a bit of a jargon involved, and people who did not have the time to watch Interstellar or read more about these kind of black holes, they did not have much of a comfort level here. Luckily, as it should happen, jargon based passages will have easy questions. That is what happened here also. 2 inference questions, both of them easy. One scan and verify, one strengthen. So I've always differentiated between scan and verify and mentioned in the passage. In scan and verify, you can actually go back to the passage and search what is given and what is not given. My third passage, should learning be fun? Seems like a familiar topic, but might have gone into a bit of a weird zone. It might have given you it might have stoked your imagination about the new models of learning that you see every day. Whatever it is, very easy to read. 4 questions, 3 of them direct questions, one indirect question. The one indirect question has been labeled a moderate question. The other 3 were pretty much direct questions, which is why this will also fall into. In fact, I'll show you later why I would have attempted passage 3 second. And then you go to the dark truth about avocados, strategically put at the end, because we want people to use their selection skills. I will be least surprised in the entire country if cat does the same, puts the easiest questions in the middle of difficult or moderate level questions, and tests you specifically on your ability to find these easy questions. My approach to this paper would have been, I would have started with the 4th passage and then gone to anything else, no matter how easy or difficult, because it's a very easy to read passage. Just that if this is not the first, if this is actually the 3rd or the 4th passage that you attempt on the test, even if it is easy, this is one passage where you would be sitting with unnecessary, avoidable, silly mistakes. You finish the 4 passages, you have 2 summary questions from a passage that was very, very easy. You bounce into 2 summary questions which are fairly difficult, both of them considering the time constraint, as well as because reading the passage was not so difficult, but the answer choices were extremely close. Specifically for Gautam Buddha, where the answer choices are like you end up considering 3 out of 4 as correct answers. And same with the Nietzsche passage, where the passage was not very difficult, but because you spend so much time, if you have attempted question 17 before question 18 is going to scare you like anything. Because question 17, the passage was not difficult, the answer choices were difficult. While in question 18, the passage is not so difficult, but the answer choices are extremely easy to identify, provided you understand the passage. So yes, if many of you read the Nietzsche passage and felt that it was not moderate, it was actually difficult to read, I can empathize. It happens if you have struggled with the Gautam Buddha passage. Then we had out of context 2 questions. The first was difficult, very difficult. I expect a lot of debate on that question. The second about the hurricanes, not so difficult if you use logical sequencing. If you have used parajumbling here, then question 20 might have seemed difficult to you. For me, there were very straight links. 19th, yes, that links were pretty tricky. So 2 questions, one difficult, one moderate, but then no negative marking. You guys would have taken your chances. And then logical continuation. If you survived summary, you would have been absolutely stuck here. I'll call them moderate because the first question, if you understand the sequence of ideas, the answer was very straightforward. That's why I've done fairly far choices. The answer was very straightforward. But the second one, yes, the choices were a bit challenging. We were very likely to get confused between two answer choices. So that was my value of art. And then you came to an absolute shocker. Shocker, surprise, Diwali gift, Diwali cracker, whatever you want to call it, a question type that you might have not seen in the last few weeks. A question type where you had 5 sentences, each sentence had 2 words, you select either A or B, and the first sentence itself is a bomb. Anticipating, expecting, there is no way you are getting out of it. You can play around with as many things as you want. Very few of you would know whether the answer should be anticipating or expecting. It should be anticipating, but why, how? Only the explanation will tell most of you why it should be anticipating and not expecting. And not just the anticipating, expecting one, there were at least 2 more words where the choices were very close. So yes, going by the answer choices would have definitely helped you. Not so much in question 23. I mean, in question 23, going by the answer choices might have helped you, but question 24, it would be, I think, a very low probability that people actually know what is wrong with the answer choice in question 24. 25, it might click, listen to reason, listen to a reason. 24, it is highly unlikely that it will click because 24 focuses on something that is a massive part of our colloquial usage. So that is why I have labeled it 24. You might get it right by a fluke. You will most probably not be able to justify why your answer is correct. So with this pattern, what happens to my paper? 9 easy questions, 12 moderate questions, 4 difficult questions. What would I have expected? 7 to 8 attempts out of 9, moderate 6 to 7 out of 12, difficult 1 to 2. You might have attempted more in moderate, and I'm okay with that. But then if you attempt more in moderate, that should not be at the expense of fewer attempts in the easy section, because that does not help. If you have attempted more of moderate and almost 0 of difficult, I'm okay with that. But this would be my preferred sequence. 7 correct in easy, that should always be the case. 5 correct in the moderate questions and 1 in the difficult section. How to reach 98 percentile in less than 40 minutes. Start with passage 4. Get me all 4 correct in 8 to 9 minutes. Then you go to passage 2, which was not so difficult, the passage on black holes. Get me all 3 correct in 6 to 7 minutes. There was one question where you could have been tricked, but not more than that. Then you go to passage 3, you identify the 2 direct questions. Maybe you attempt 3 because there were 3 direct questions. You get me 2 correct out of 3 in 5 minutes. Very possible. Passage 3 was not a very difficult passage. I repeat, it was that easiest contemporary passage on should learning be fun. Then you go to passage 1 where you get me 2 out of 3 correct. Again, because I can easily, once you have reached passage 1, you have attempted 4 plus 3 plus 3, 10 RC questions, and you are confident about 9 out of 10 questions, which means in passage 1, if you skim through the passage and you attempt only the 2 direct questions, it is okay. Then you go to out of context. Why? Because no negative marking. And get me at least 1 correct. Or maybe you get both of them correct. So once I'm done with the passages, yes, there is going to be a bit of fluidity. There is going to be some variability. You go from out of context to usage questions. Only 1 correct is sufficient with me. Or maybe you get me more. That's why I'm saying there's a fluidity, there's a variability here. You might get both of the out of context questions correct, but you might not be left with any time for summary or logical continuation. Or maybe you are really, really good with summary questions, and that is why instead of going to out of context, you go to straight away to summary questions. Or maybe you are just good with logical continuation. Whatever it is, my expectation from the verbal ability section is not more than 3 correct. You get me 3 correct in 15 minutes, you've done an amazing job, provided you get me all of the above correct. So that is how I reach to what I showed you earlier. My percentiles would be 16 attempts out of 25. I have reduced your 80% criteria. Had you gone in with an expectation of 80%, but you had only attempted 60%, I think you would have done a wonderful job. So 98 percentile, 16 attempts, 13 correct. Hopefully only 3 correct. So when I, again, to remind you of what I said last time, when I said 13 correct, that means the remaining 3 incorrect are the ones where there is a negative marking. This does not include the incorrect answers for questions where there is no negative marking. So that would put me at a score of 38, which is equivalent to a 98 percentile, more than sufficient. The paper was 75 marks. Yes, with all the pressure that you guys are building up as we approach CAT, this paper getting a 37 or a 38 would be worth an achievement. Anything closer to 40 or 42 means you have definitely mastered what I call strategy. So in the next 10 days, your only thing to work on is strategy. Papers will keep coming up, structures might keep changing here and there. What will work in your favor is if you have a strategy, your scores will not fluctuate massively. If you keep on changing your strategy, if you forget the golden rule of 80 into 80, then you really need a lot of good luck to get into your preferred score. That's it. I'm going to hand over the analysis to Srinivas sir. He will take over DI and LR. I'll see you guys again in the next few days. Till then, keep solving and take a lot of care. Srinivas sir, the dais is all yours.
Thank you, Ajit sir. Thank you. Thank you. It's nice. Yeah, hi guys. Trust everybody is doing good. Let me take you through the DILR section analysis. So as you would have seen, you would have understood that there are fewer sets in this particular paper. So that itself would have put you in a little bit of trouble in the sense like because there are not too many sets to select, right? So therefore, see, always there are two types of problem. When there is nothing to select, that's also a problem. Then there are too many things to select, sometimes that's also a problem. So this is the set. This is a paper in which there is hardly anything to select because there were only about 5 sets, as you have seen. So in whenever number of sets are fewer, so always it's making a strategy in the sense like deciding which sets you need to solve is very, very important because sometimes, the first you got to identify the difficulty level. I would rather say that first 5 minutes everybody should have spent to understand what is this paper, why there are only 5 sets. Therefore, like you got to move very meticulously here. So therefore, planning plays a very, very important role. Even had you taken that first 5 minutes to plan out, that would have done a lot of good for you. Because there are only 5 sets to do that, right? No, it's not unlike before 7 sets, 8 sets. No, you don't have such luxury of sets to pick from. Right? Even 5 becoming 6 becomes a luxury. Now 5 becoming 4, all right, no, that's too dangerous. So because you need to be really choosy, you can't afford to lose too much of time in such sets, right? So that's another thing. Also, calibrating the difficulty level would have been very, very important. With 5 sets, is it a kind of a paper where I could have done all 5 sets through, or it is a kind of a paper where it is really probing, it's asking me questions about my ability. So therefore, all right, no, so should I be hand-picking those particular couple of sets or 2 or 3 sets, and should I focus on closing them? Such strategy though played an important role there. So anybody taken the first 5 minutes, 1, to calibrate this particular paper, seconds to choose the sets based on their own strength, based on their familiarity, would have definitely done well in this paper. But if you had not spent that first 5 minutes, had you just simply rushed into the paper, doing here and there, panicking, definitely in the first 5 or 6 minutes, you would have panicked more than getting a clarity. Look, two things will happen when you start the paper. Are you trying to confuse yourself, or are you trying to get some clarity in the first 5 minutes? That's what is going to happen in such kind of papers, right? So if you are trying to get a clarity, it's good. If you are trying to confuse yourself, then you messed it up big time, right? So therefore, you need to consider this factor whenever number of number of sets given, especially in DSLR, are very few. You need to be clear. You got to get that right in the first 5 minutes about which are the sets that you want to try out. Whether it works in your favor or not is a different issue, but at least based on your familiarity, based on your gut feeling, right? Based on your own strengths, solid. You got to figure out that which are the sets that you want to do out there. Let's take a look. Let's go through each set out here. Here was a set where the unit digits were erased, right? No, so basically you are seeing the tens and the hundreds places. There were 10 weeks, and each week the person write 3 types of tests. So therefore, this is one of the sets that you are looking at. Unit digits were removed. Definitely, right? No, you might have comprehended this question, no doubt about this. The danger again. So what was the danger with this particular set to do it in the first round is all four questions were theta question. That was the problem. So in case already you are getting your comprehension wrong, probably you wouldn't have considered one of those particular points, or one of the points did not occur in your mind. The danger is you get all four questions wrong, or at least half of the questions may go wrong. And you might have spent, of course, with the theta question, if you take it in the first round, naturally you are still warming up. Therefore, all there is a cold start. With all that problem, I'm sure all this could have taken a lot more time, and also this could have affected your accuracy. So therefore, what you should do, you got to take them once you build your confidence through the paper, maybe somewhere in between the paper, or maybe somewhere towards the end of this particular paper, but definitely not one set with all four questions being theta question should be considered for the first round. That's my take. Even if you have done this already in the later round, already when you already sufficiently warmed up, still this could have costed to do all four questions, might have costed about 10 minutes out there, because of the nature of questions, theta question, because of the nature, the questions being theta questions. You would have walked a little carefully, you would have walked that line very carefully, and hence you might have taken some time out here. So definitely, I'll let my take, it should not be done in the first round. That's very important there, because all four questions are theta questions. Not a great, you should not start with theta questions, because it will already, there would be a cold start problem with the beginning of every section, because the mind is trying to calculate the paper. Mind is trying to warm up. So therefore, with the cold start, definitely theta adds much more, it freezes the start. Right. Okay. So therefore, so here is another set. So where people were segregated, it's a team of 6, right? Team of 6, all right, you got to pick some attackers, some defenders, some midfielders, right? That was the set here. So doing all four questions was really challenging, because you got to, like, if you look at one of the questions out here, in how many ways team can be selected, right? So if you get this answer right, I'm sure all right now you get every other answer right. So every other question could have been selected, could have been done. So basically, all right, it comes down to these. All right, now it comes down to how you make those cases meticulously. Which one you would have taken that as a primary key? Would you have taken the defenders as the primary key, or have you taken the attackers as the primary key? Have you taken the midfielders as the primary key? That would have played a major role. Have you started this question on a right note? I'm sure you would have got these answers, provided already you also have certain amount of practice with respect to selection based question, because the core idea of selection based question is to find out in how many ways some selections can happen. So if you're familiar with that, you had a great gut feeling that, okay, this is the kind of set that I want to do, then it's a first round set. Otherwise, it should not be taken in the first round. Probably you go on to look for some better kind of sets. Right, better kind of sets. It depends on the familiarity. As I said, once again, if you are familiar with the selection kind of questions with the conditional statements, and then you know which one should be taken as the primary key between the 3 parameters there, then you are fine. If you get your primary key wrong, I'm sure you will go round and round and round. Right, you go round and round and round. Instead of getting certain answer, you will get some other answer. Thereby, you might have messed up 2 out of 4 questions out here. Right, that's quite possible out here. So therefore, it's a this a kind of this paper you got to really pick your sets very carefully out here. Right. Okay. Now this was the set which was in the offering. I'm sure everybody would have tried this in the first round itself, because there is hardly any piece of data. Right. The piece of data is just that's visible right in front of you, just about those 4 sentences. Right, 4 sentences and directly to the questions. Of course, every question has started with an if, which means every question they're adding information. Right. There is a basic information, there is a global information, but with every single question, they're adding some local information. Right. All right. The one thing which was confusing here, probably people might get wrong, is is the difference between the people and the couple. Sometimes he is referring to the couple, sometimes he is referring to the people. So therefore you need to be a little careful. If somebody already would have under the pressure, if would have misread those questions between the people and the couple, then they might have made some mistakes out here. But if they've been meticulous, that okay, you've been used to, so under pressure you keep your calm, so then you would have noticed it, right? And this is one set where you would have got most of your questions right, maybe 3 out of 4 questions or maybe 4 out of 4 questions. But by now you would have already come under pressure. You are thinking that okay, I'm not able to do certain sets, and then you come under pressure while doing this particular set. There were a couple of questions where he was referring to couples. There were a couple of questions where he was referring to number of people. Then that depends. That makes the difference to your answers, right? Okay. So therefore, this depends already. Had you kept your cool and you would have started with this particular set, probably would have taken 6 to 8 minutes to close this particular set. Might have got all the questions right out there. Right, yeah, this is the question. I'll let know. So on the face of it, it looks like it is a question. Okay, I can do kind of a question. But once you start, you understand that the kind of variables involved in this particular question, not a straightforward set, right? Even if somebody would have said that after 3 or 4 minutes, they would have said, okay, let me look for some better sets. Then I will come back to this. Could have been still a better bet on this. Or could have been a better bet on this. It's not an easy question to be done. Not an easy question to be done. At the same time, I'm not saying that, okay, it will be way too time consuming as well. It's not about that. But doing this under pressure for the first time is a challenge. So you got to know certain things. Doing it for the second time is different from doing it for the first time, right? Doing it under pressure is different from doing it out of pressure. Under pressure, these kind of sets can terribly trouble the mind, I'll let keep that in mind. Maybe I'll let know. So if somebody would have thought that, okay, I will take this in the second round, that's a good decision. But you thought that I will take it up in the first round, probably you would have got stressed out of this particular set and might have wasted most of your time, because you simply come under stress while doing this particular paper. If you come under stress, I'm sure already that you would have kind of surrendered to that particular paper rather than trying to dominate the paper. You'd have surrendered. This set might have just made you surrender in case already you got the information wrong here, and then you would have moved. Already you wouldn't have got the right sense of direction in this. Definitely, I'll let know. So you'd have been all over the place and you'd have surrendered to the paper with this particular set. Right now, here was another set. There's another set here. So it looked quite long. It's quite long. Of course, yes, it's 4 Venn diagrams, isn't it? It's a 4 Venn diagram in one diagram. Definitely, it's a lengthy set. But trust me, in this kind of paper, isn't this the kind of set already now that is that's better to be attempted? Yes, because if you look at the first set, all 4 were theta question. There was no certainty on that. You might spend 10 minutes on that, but are you sure that are you getting your answers wrong? Don't know. There is no reassurance on this. In the previous set, that only leading to the frustration. So therefore, already even if you look at them, this might look like, you may say that, okay, I will do this later. But the point is here, what? All right, now this is a calendar. This is something like, no, so it's like, it's a known devil. All right, rather than an unknown angel in the first set in the theta, this is a known devil. That's fine. It's a fair, straightforward, 4 simple Venn diagrams. Sure, each Venn diagram might take 2 minutes. So what? You might have taken 8 minutes and you would have taken another 2 or 3 minutes to answer the question. That's fair enough. A dozen odd minutes, but short 4 questions out there, 8 to 10 minutes, or 10 minutes you might have taken 10 minutes or 12 minutes, or the 12 minutes also, or at the 12 minutes also, because it's a very fair, familiar territory. The momentum gets built as you start solving this particular set. You do the first Venn diagram, the momentum gets built because the language used is very parallel, very similar. So therefore, the momentum is getting built while doing this particular set. Therefore, about 10 minutes, you could have closed it, at the most 12 minutes. But trust me, you'd have got 4 out of 4 questions right. All right, 4 out of 4 questions right. So keeping that in mind, already you know that, okay, this also one of the sets that you might have considered. So if you look at this paper was lengthy. At the same time, this particular paper was tricky. At the same time, this particular paper was challenging. Therefore, I don't expect that people might have done quite a bit of things on this particular paper. So ultimately, already it might look something like this for you. Right, so doing about, say, you look at 98 percentile there, getting about 10 questions could have been a good bet. Somebody would have just kept their cool and then picked their sets, or doing about 3 sets, or even if not completing 3 sets, you just pick 3 sets and do a little bit here and there, maybe 3 questions out of one particular set, maybe 4 questions out of one particular set. You would have attempted about 10 questions and you would have still got about 1 or 2 wrong, let's say. Now still, you would have got about 98 percentile. But the point is keeping cool to get the 10 questions was important. Look, we got to learn to calibrate the paper. It's not that in the last paper I did 15 attempts. Doesn't mean that in this paper I got to do same 15 attempts to get my 98 percentile. Maybe about 10 questions good enough, right? So you just want to get them, you want to get out of outright. Maybe 9 questions could have done the trick for you to get about 98 percentile, just more than 2 sets. That's what is the offering, about 3 sets. That's what is required out here, right? So that's what you kind of understand, that doing about 3 sets was a good bet. In fact, doing about 2 sets was also a good bet, right? About doing 2 sets, I'm sure already you would have crossed about 90 percentile. You could have even touched 95 percentile with just doing 2 sets meticulously. Spend all your time, just pick those 2 sets which are to your strength and doing them. I'm sure might have given you that itself might have given you about 95 percentile, right? So between 2 and 3 sets is the question here. Sure, somebody tending towards 90, 100 percentile or 99 plus percentile, I'm sure they would have also ventured into the 4th set, or they would also got into the 4th set. That's a different thing. But for me, all right, now as a good test taker, somebody doing about 3 sets would have done a fantastic job on this. That could have been, even 3 sets could have been possible, provided you really kept your cool, held your nerves through this particular paper. So technically, all right, now this entire paper was actually probing, not just this particular section. As Ajit sir was mentioning, I was listening to that, right? Even VARC section was really probing, right? VARC was probing, the DLR was probing, back-to-back 2 sections were really asking for you, right? So then, because the strategic part of VARC was actually questioning there, right? So like VARC and DILR, then probably the pressure would have released a little bit in the QA section. So therefore, when you look at the scores around the 98 percentile margin, you understand that VARC and DILR are really low when you compare it with QA section at the 98 percentile, which is at 40, right, which is way above these 2 particular sections. So which implies probably the pressure is released only in the QA section. Basically, you were doing 2 sections back to back under tremendous pressure. You got to really hold your nerves to do 2 sections back to back under pressure. Right, good. So that's about this paper. So even if you look at 98 percentile, so about 40 attempts, overall VRC, DLR, QA put together, about 40 to 42 attempts, with about 85% overall accuracy. Maybe in VRC it could be 80%, maybe in QA it's about 90%. Overall about 85% percentage accuracy on about 42 questions. That's about 1/3 of the paper. That's about less than half of the paper, right? That could have done. That could have given you 98 percentile there. So remember, all right, now technically you want to get a 98, 99 kind of percentile. All you got to do is meticulously choose half of that particular paper and try attempting it, right? That's the analysis from our end for today. We will see you again in the next paper. Keep working, guys. The next 10 days are going to be really crucial for each one of us, to you as well as to us. We will try to help our bit. So you start putting effort from your side. Definitely God will bless all our efforts. God bless, stay blessed. I will see you in the next video. Bye till then.